Okay, we're live. I am streaming live for the first time using Restream, so I'm excited to see how this works. I'm going to be putting the chat up, but I don't think that you guys can see it. I think only I can see it. Let me try typing something. Hello from Shelly. There we go. So I think that is how that's going to work. So I believe that I am streaming to YouTube and Facebook. So I have no idea how this is going to work. We'll just see. I don't know if you guys can chat with me on the Facebook version of this live stream or how it's going to work from YouTube. So we're just going to play it by ear, but it looks like I have a good signal. You guys can see me. Hopefully you can hear me. Mic's on, camera's on, nothing's muted. It's going to be a charcoal drawing. I'm starting, so I'm going to just start with thinking, really. Like, this is what I'm thinking, and this is how I'm going to start. I've been kind of staring at my reference image, which you can see here. It's a photo that I took of a gentleman named Justin at the American Frontier Productions. They do Western photo shoots there. And we went to Kansas, which is where they're located. I think it was a couple of years ago, but I'm excited. I'm going to be going back this October, so I'll be shooting some interesting video and taking some more photos in October at the American Frontier production again. So I was looking at the reference image, which I pulled this photo up in Photoshop, and I kind of played around with textures and effects. And it's way safer to experiment on your photograph in Photoshop than it is on an actual charcoal drawing. So I'm an oil painter predominantly, oil painting, oil portraits. So going into this charcoal drawing is a completely different mindset. It is not like oil painting at all. So I'm having to kind of just plan a little bit more because I'm going to work very lightly with very light, like values in the 2 to 4 range initially for a while and build up and kind of sneak up on the darker values. I'll be putting those in later. And I'm going to see how long and how far along I can get. Maybe we'll do this live stream for, I don't know, maybe about an hour. And whatever I don't finish today live, I'll be sure to continue the video and I'll post it next Saturday on my channel. It's just a regular edited video. So there won't be all of these streaming distractions. But I think it'll be fun. It'll be interesting for you guys to see how I start. It'll be interesting for me to see how I start. And I'll just kind of talk you through my thought process as I go. And every so often, I will try to look over at the chat and see if there's anything going on there. But the live stream is scheduled to start in 1 minute at 11. So I just wanted to jump on like 5 minutes ahead of time and make sure everything works. Because, you try to have fun with this and make it not too nerve-wracking, but it's a little nerve-wracking just because of all of the tech, trying to make sure everything's set up right. And I hope and think that it is. So with that in mind, I think I'm going to get started. I have my Casey Baugh charcoal bubble effects kit that I just got. So I'm super excited about that. And the main element that I got from that is this charcoal sachet. It's got charcoal in the little sack. And then I also like to use this edge out here to dip into what I also got, which was really cool, charcoal powder. So you can kind of see it's in this little container, so you can dip it this way, but you can also tap. You'll see how I start with that. So I'm going to be using the charcoal sachet predominantly in the beginning with my handy dandy blender stump. So these two tools are going to be my main starting tools, along with the kneaded eraser. And also what I've done is I have my reference image on my computer monitor, and it's pulled up. It is zoomed in to a percentage of zoom that allows me to know I have a one-to-one measuring situation happening. So anything I measure on my computer monitor is exactly what I'm going to want to put on my paper. So my paper is 18 inches wide by 22 inches tall. I'm using a Strathmore paper. It's a 400 drawing series, which is smooth. So it's a little bit thick, kind of like a Bristol paper. I'm going to try not to touch it. So I have my handy dandy little sheet here, which has painter's tape, so I can tape that onto my working paper when I need to have my hand resting on it, because you don't want to touch the paper. You don't want to get the oils from your hands on your working surface. That's not a good idea. So that in mind, I believe, so I rolled this blender stump in a little bit of the charcoal residue that was on my sanding paper, just to get a little something on there. And I want to start my drawing right about here. That'll be the top of his hat. And using my proportion tool, I can see that from the top of his hat to where the shadow lies, it's going to be somewhere in here. I've got that really cool tilt of the hat, which I don't want to lose. So I'm just lightly suggesting that angle. So a lot of times when I'm using the proportion tool, I like to kind of lay down what I think is the right mark and then check it. So what I also did was at the tops, outer corners, was I put in the middle line, and then I've divided that into quarters. So I can see on my edge of the paper, I don't have any grid marks inside the paper, if I need also just to have a little further direction with the grid. And the beauty of just starting really light like this is it's so easy to erase. You can't go in with too heavy of, like stick charcoals. If you're pressing into the paper, it's going to be way more difficult to erase. So I am just dusting the surface of the paper, kind of killing some of that white. And even if you tap the sachet, it's not pressing that charcoal powder into the paper. It's gonna be easy to sculpt and carve into that charcoal. So I'm paying attention to the fact that Justin's face has light on the right side of it. I want to leave a lot of that open to the white of the paper and make sure that I note there's shadow on the left side of the face. So I am just suggesting some shadow patterns. There's a nice shadow under that hat line, which is about right here. I just realized I have the sachet in my left hand. I'm totally not left-handed, but it seems to be working for me. So I've got my center line about here, and I'm noticing that the bottom of his nose is going to be somewhere in here, and then his mustache and beard just below that. So So I'm just going to suggest that I'm kind of feeling out how far down my head is going to be. And I'm not super concerned with trying to fit the whole bottom of that image onto my paper, but there should be enough room for it. And after we get some of the drawing done, I'll have to show you this on the part 2, which I'll post next Saturday. I'll be doing some textured effects that I learned from watching Casey Baugh using acetone and a spray bottle, which comes in his kit. So there's this really cool spray bottle that's specially made for the acetone so that it won't leak, because like plastic bottles and other weird containers might actually leak. So with that, I can make some of the bubble effects that you see in the reference image. So those bubble effects are actually going to come from spritzing acetone onto my drawing. So I'll be sure to post that, because that's at the very end. You can't really start doing that at the beginning, but I can show you. This is my practice board. So I don't like to make marks on my drawing that I haven't practiced already. So when you're using acetone, you have to lightly dust the surface of your paper to spray. You can see these dots right here. Oops. Drop my tool. You can see these dots, and that's what the acetone gives you, these kind of drippy effects. And then there's some other brushing effects that I'm going to try out. But I sprayed acetone on these areas just to see what would happen. And really, it doesn't disperse the charcoal powder at all. So if you want to get these sort of drippy effects, you have to lightly dust the surface with your like loose charcoal powder or some kind of sachet situation. You could have, if you sharpen your charcoal and you save the sharpens, you could actually brush it on with a paintbrush if you don't have a sachet. But you really basically just dusting and letting the charcoal sit on top of the paper in order to utilize this acetone. And Casey was explaining that you use the acetone over, say, water or alcohol because it is it's going to evaporate and dry faster than any of those things, and also it leaves no residue. So using acetone in this situation is a really good thing. Let's see. All right. I want to get a little more dusting of charcoal happening here. Just kind of going around that area where the hat's going to sit. I got to put some charcoal down in order to be able to carve out things. So it's kind of like when you tone your canvas when you're doing a painting. And since this is just lightly dusting, it will erase and not be too permanent of a situation, which is what I want. I was thinking about where is his face in relation to that hat mark, the shadow that's just below the brim of his hat. And you got that really awesome beard coming in just below the half mark of the canvas. I think it looks really cool to just kind of tone the paper rather, and make it look kind of marbled or natural. And then we can work into that. I didn't want to start this out as if it were just a drawing. It's kind of like painting, but you have to just be careful. It's something that's, you know, you want to build up slowly. Sometimes with painting an oil portrait, you know, I'll go right on in there with some nice shadow colors and start things pretty dark, but I can't really do that in this situation. All right. Just looking at sculpting in that dark side of that hat. And I'm going to let that left side of the hat be pretty much a lost edge. So it's going to kind of get lost into the dark shadows of his hair on the left side of his head. And then later on, I'll get to play with some of that bubble effect. And this is setting me up for that because I'm not pressing this charcoal hard into the paper. Everything's just lightly dusted on. Trying to get that angle of the hat again. I don't want to lose that angle. And then his face has a little bit of this sort of tilt going on. So I started at the top and I've been working my way down from the top. Okay, I'm going to get my blender stump and just kind of solidify where that top of the hat is. Versus where the brim of the hat is. I feel like it's going to be about right here. So I'm going to put that mark and I'm going to check it with my proportion tool. And hopefully it's pretty close, which it is. So I'm going to keep going. Putting in that shadow underneath the brim of the hat. So I'm not really looking to do anything too photorealistic. I really want to interpret this photograph that I've already kind of played around with in Photoshop. So you can kind of see the direction that I want to take it. Let's see how thick this shadow should be. That way I don't get too crazy with it. That's looking right. I love my proportion tool. If you guys have seen me do any of my painting, you know that. I love my proportion tool and I love doing one-to-one measuring just because it's so easy. I don't want to have to do too much math. So once I know everything's in place, then I can go back in. Like this shadow area is going to be much, much darker, but I don't want to do anything too permanent until I have solidified the features, especially the eyebrows and the eyes, because the eyebrow is very important in getting a likeness. I'm just looking at where the eyebrow, that left eyebrow starts about right here. And I don't want to push that into the paper too hard. I love his thick eyebrows. Those are so awesome. I've painted Justin a few times now, and he's got the best expressions. He's so fun to paint. So what I want to do is see how far over is that from this quarter line. It's about right there. We're in that world. And what I'll do is measure how wide is the eyebrow. Somewhere about there. I'm going to soften this line. It's a little, got a little dark right there. Okay. Okie dokie. I'm going to use this left eye as kind of the anchor to where all the other features are going to go. So once I know I have this left eye nailed down, then I can use it comparative measuring wise, for the other features in the face. So I'm just looking at the shadow that's on the left side of the nose. I've got just this little bit of angle to it. So I like putting in the shadow and then putting in the eye, because I know if I have the shadow in the right place and I have the left side of the face in the right place, pretty much leaves where the eye is going to need to go. I've heard it said many times in portraiture that if you can capture the shape of the shadows, you will capture the likeness of the sitter. So we'll definitely see if that's true. I'm just looking to where the bottom of the nose / top of the mustache is from the top of that left eyebrow, and it's somewhere in this world here. So these are all guesses. They're educated guesses because I have my proportion tool and I have the 1-to-1 measuring. But, you know, they're still educated guesses. So once that I get things solidified and in place, then I can figure out, you know, if any little bits need to be adjusted. And usually it's just a small adjustment that needs to happen at that point. Nothing too crazy. So I just want to double check that. Isn't that what they say about measuring? Measure twice, cut once. Something along that lines. Okay, so I see the left edge of the nostril is lining up with the inner corner of the eye, which is just slightly inside the eyebrow. Somewhere about right here is our left edge of the nostril. And if that lines up with the inner corner of the eye, that puts us about here. So one of the things about drawing, and especially drawing with charcoal, you have to think about the areas that you want to be white or very light. And it can only be as light as the paper. You can't be any lighter than the paper. So everything that's going to have a highlight, I kind of think about that and try to work around it. Looking at the angle of that left eye, needs to come down like that. So you want to take your time setting up your features. There's no reason to do these things in a hurry. Just build everything up slowly. And once I know this left eye is in the right place, everything looks correct position-wise, then I can move on. But not until. All right, so I've got the left crease of the eye. Now I'm going in for that lash line. The eyes are the vocal points. They're going to have the most contrast and the most detail. Let me just look with my proportion tool, checking the width of that eye. So we know the inner corner lines up with that left nostril, so I made my eye really tiny. So I'm going to draw it again. You can see how the charcoal is just really resting on the paper, so it's so easy to erase. I feel like sculpting when I do charcoal. Just softening up everything. All right, I'm going to measure from the bottom of the shadow to the area of the eye just above the pupil iris. I want to see if I'm in the ballpark. And it looks like I am. So I'm going to check the width of the eye. So I know it's far enough down from the shadow of that hat. So I have to be careful inside the eye not to end it too short. I really want to get these eyes right, so I'm going to make sure that I do. So that is going to be sort of the eyeball, but I can't stand it being that light staring out at me. Okay. So the eye crease comes out further than the eyelash line, which kind of bumps into it out here like so. Kind of converge about right there. I feel like I need more of an angle down. I take away a little, I add a little. Okay, let's see. Now I want to measure where from the shadow, the bottom shadow of the hat, does the lower lash line come in? Somewhere in this world. So it's looking pretty good. So let me just measure it from the lash line, the upper lash to the bottom lash. So that's looking good too. I want to really make sure I can open up that eye as much as possible. Yep, looks good. So that's how I guess, and then I can be sure. And you can kind of see the inner parts of the left tear duct area. And I'm just sculpting those in. So I have to remember the light's coming in from the right. I never want to lose sight of that. So it's going to be hitting this little underneath area because it rolls out a little bit and then it rolls around and back into the eye. It gets darker out here towards the outer left corner. And I'm just looking at that as one shadow mass. putting that in like so. So anybody that just jumped on, I'll just let you know what I don't finish today, I will be posting as a part 2 next Saturday on my regular channel. It'll be a nice edited video like I do. Okay, now I feel like that's positioned pretty good. Let me just slide back a little bit and really look at it. Half of the challenge of drawing is taking the time to look, to really look at your reference, really look at your drawing. And I try to find relationships to angles. Like once I have some more features, right now we have the brim of the hat, pretty much the eyebrow. Like where does the inner corner of the left eye line up with if I just pop a diagonal in there? If I line that up, it just cuts through about there on the hat, which means this edge of the hat is like right here, because I can see this triangle shape when I cut through the diagonal like that. I like to extend lines through and then see what's on this side of it and then see what's on the other side of it. All right, so I feel like I'm looking at the spaces between things. His eyebrow's nice and thick. Let's check the thickness of it. Since I have my proportion tool with 1-to-1 measuring, I have the ability to do that. So it could be a tad bit thicker. And with that in mind, I feel like it could be thicker on the bottom, closer to the eye coming down, especially in males. In men, the eye tends to be closer to the eyebrow. So we got that set in there. And the outer eyebrows over here. His eyebrows make this portrait. I feel like really don't want to mess them up. So I don't know if you saw in the beginning, I'm just using my sandpaper where I sharpened my pencils, and I just rub my blending stump on that just to pick up a little bit of graphite so that I can use that to draw with. And that way I know it's not going to be too harsh. I'm just reshaping this left corner of the forehead just above the left eyebrow. So I'm not going for photorealism. I'm just looking to make sure things are in the right place, because when I get towards the end later today, I'm going to do the acetone effects to create these bubbles that you see on the reference. So I don't have to worry about everything being perfect, because I know that's going to happen. I feel like I'm going to push this eye crease up and angle it just a little bit more, about to there. I'm just using the lightest amount of pressure. Very, very little. So I feel like that eye is looking pretty close to good. So I think I'm going to go for the pupil iris. Let's see, I'm going to measure from the left tear duct to the outside width of where the iris lands. Actually, I'm going to do it from the left outer corner. It's going to be really important to have that distance from the left outer corner be correct. And I'm just measuring the actual width of the iris pupil. So it's a little darker at the top of the iris pupil, and then it gets a little lighter. There's also that highlight, so I'm going to kind of go around the highlight. Unlike in oil painting, I would just paint this all one value and then kind of work into it. Something like that. So I'm going to check the height of the pupil iris. That looks like it. And I'm going to check that left negative space again from it. I feel like I need to open that up a little bit. Let me check just the white of the eye, which is about there. Yeah, I think I need to open that up the tiniest bit. It's these little tiny adjustments that do make the difference. So I don't like to skip them. And just making sure my highlight is here. I don't want to lose him. Okay. We opened that up, but it's not that light in value, so I'm just knocking it back. I have high hopes for this charcoal. I would like it to be one of my formal finish pieces in my newer Western series, which if you want to take a look at it, you can. It's located at westernsinwood.com. westernsinwood.com. That's where my Western art lives. Alrighty. Just going for a little more shadow shape inside that left eye. Really want to build that shadow up because it is on the left side of the nose, which is not really receiving a lot of light at all. It's not a full-on cast shadow, but it is definitely on the shadow side of things. As is this left nostril. I haven't got to quite to the underplane yet. We could start a little notation of that left nostril. So I'm just building up value with the lightest amount of pressure there. And I'm going to just kind of guesstimate this right nostril with very light pressure. So I am anticipating that's not in the right place. I'm gonna need to move it. So very lightly done. So I can't move it. I want to put in a little more value in this eye just to really see that this is where it's gonna live. I haven't even picked up a pencil yet. But I will. Once I know everything's really in the right place, I feel highly 100% confident about it, I will anchor it in and solidify it with some of the pencils. So remember at the beginning I said I didn't want to lose the white of the paper over here on the right side of the face because this is the lightest part of the charcoal portrait. So I'm just making sure I can still erase into it, which I can because I only lightly dusted charcoal onto my paper so far. I have not pressed anything really significantly into the paper. So I'm just using a light touch. It's kind of like painting with the kneaded eraser. Just want to make sure I have that nice and light. That's going to be the lightest part of my drawing. Kind of say, this is the first time I've used this Edge Pro Gear sachet that came in the Casey Baugh kit, but you can get it separate from the kit. Love it so much. Thinking about where the edge of the right side of the face is going to go. And it lines up right inside the outer edge of the hat. So I'm looking kind of there for that indication of where that lines up. And then he's got some hair going down this way. And I'm just really looking for any shadow shapes, any dark shadow shapes. So on that lower right side of his face, you got this beautiful dark triangle. So I'm just kind of lightly indicating that next to his beard and jaw side of his face. All right, so we're looking somewhere in this world for a right eye. and an eyebrow. And that eyebrow goes right up into the shadow of the underside of that hat brim. Okay. Taking down some of that value underneath the hat brim. I know the hat brim is going to get a lot darker, so it's going to really make the underneath area of the face look lighter. So I know I'm just going to tackle that before it happens. All right. So I am thinking about the right eyebrow going in here, and then the eye. So we have the glabella, this little triangular area between the eyebrows. And it's a little bit darker in value, maybe 1 or 2 steps darker than the bridge of the nose. So just tamp that down a little bit. And then we can add some value on the left side of the nose. And it just goes right up under that left eyebrow and into the bottom part of it. So not only am I thinking about shadows and positioning, measuring, touch, light or hard touch, I'm also thinking about mark making, because I don't want to have to erase a lot of the marks that I've made. I want them to stand. I think there's probably millions of different marks you could get from charcoal. So I really want to play with that and let that stand as part of the beauty of this artwork. Like I said, I am not in this for a photorealistic finish. I am looking to be creative with my marks and have an interesting portrait to look at when it's all said and done. So I want to really solidify the distance from that shadow underneath the brim of the hat to his left eyebrow. Because like I said before, everything's going to be building out from here. If this is not correct, then everything beyond it will not be correct. And that would not be good. When things like that happen, you usually just have to start over. Okay, I am looking at how is the nostril lining up with the tear duct of the right eye. If I drop a plumb line, it's just inside the iris. So my nose is off. My nose is off. So thank goodness this is on here lightly. Even with the eraser, I'm not pushing hard, just lightly working into that. All right, let's see. Plumb line. I'm going to use a plumb line. So with that in mind, the edge of his nostril is going to be about right here, in line with the inner iris pupil. So I was way off. That is what happens. Perfectly all right, because we can fix this. At this point, we're very fixable. Let's see, how wide is the outer nostril, well, the outer edge of the left side of the nose to the inner nostril. Takes us to about right here. And I was looking at the shape and the angle of that nostril, just going in here, like so. And there's a shadow on the inner part of that under plane. And then there's some light, so I'm just going to jump over to that right nostril, but let me measure. It's not very clear from the inside, so I'm going to measure from the outside of the left nostril to the inside of the right nostril, which puts us here actually. There we go. I'm sculpting the tip of the nose. So I'm going to check the entire width of the nose, and it looks like the right side of the nose gets lost, the lost edge into the light, but that's where it would be. So I am going to leave that right side open. And that's a pretty good indication of the nose. Now I'll check it from the top of the left nostril to that shadow line of the hat. Top of the left nostril, shadow line of the hat. It's looking pretty good. Yeah. Okay. And let's go from the left iris to where the shadow starts on the right side of the nose, which is going to be in this world here. And I'm just stepping up towards that eyebrow, which is kind of lost in the shadow a little bit. You kind of see it, and the top part of it just gets blended into the shadow of the underplane of the hat. I'm looking at the distance between the eyebrows, and there's not a lot of distance between them, which makes me think I'm going to bring this left eyebrow towards the center line a little bit more. Like that. Okay. I want to solidify this center nose highlight. But to do that, I have to add shadow right down the line of the nose, making sure it is the correct angle. And it is. There's our shadow playing on the left side of the nose. So you can just start to see his face is emerging out of this mess, this controlled chaos. I need to see that shadow pretty significantly so that I can really be sure about the angle of the head. Also, it helps me really be sure about the eyebrow placement, which is very, very important to me. I know from my past drawing situations, I tend to exaggerate angles, so I have to be careful not to do that. Okay. I feel like the angle of the head's looking pretty good. Yep. Let me measure. Looking for something so sort of concrete. So let's use the left iris outer edge to the side of the face. It's going to be somewhere here, which is just about where I planned for it to be. Looking at that beautiful dark shadow kind of surrounding that forehead on the right. Okay, I'm starting to see Justin. Yay. All right, let's see. I'm going to measure exactly the eyebrow, that really thick, dense part goes from about here to here, so we can thicken that up right into the shadow. And then look at that distance on that glabella. Looks good. All right, let's measure, where does the eye crease fall under the right eyebrow? Somewhere in this world. Now the other thing I want to check is, where does it line up with the left one? That looks right. They are level with one another, running in that same angle. Somewhere in that world. So we're on the light side of the face again. So I'm just going to open up some of the value in that eye socket. And then we'll add in shadow where we want shadow. Really nice nose highlight happening about there. Again, having a couple of those highlights established lets me gauge my values a little better. I needed to have a few darks and a few highlights put in. Alrighty. I'm really trying to see the shape of this line, this crease in the right eye. Kind of has this little turn right here in the inner corner. And then it goes down like that. I'm going to measure from the outer left iris to the inner iris of the right eye. I really want that space to be correct. So I think it's about here. I want to come down to the lash line, which moves into that tear duct area about right there. And is about like that. And I can see a little bit of a lash kind of going up. And then we have the crease again coming out past the lash line. And almost going straight down to the corner, outer corner of the right eye. So we are going to use that little mark we made to kind of put in the iris pupil. I'm going around the highlight as best I can. I'm looking at the left iris pupil to see how far down it goes. So I match them. And I just have it lightly placed. Let me actually measure the width of the iris pupil of the right eye. And that is correct. So somewhere in this world is our right eye. There's a little shadow that happens underneath the lash line. So right where the pupil tucks up under the eyelashes, I like to put it pretty dark. It also helps draw the viewer's eye to the eyes of the portrait, which is what I want. And I just want to really get the roundness of his gaze. It's so round. And I think that is part of the charm in these eyes, is the roundness. It's almost a childlike feeling in the eyes. And then you get down to the rest of it, and it's that's what this kind of a contraposed situation. Childlike eyes on a poker face, which is the name of the drawing, by the way, poker face. Alrighty. Just looking at areas where I can solidify the shape of the eyes. And drive home that roundness. Looking for any characteristic type lines or shadows that are really going to help get the features and the feeling of this face. I'm looking where this little corner on the right kind of lines up just about here with the iris. Like so. I want to push up the white of the eye a little bit. Not so much pushing up the white of the eye, but just carving into that lash line. Needed to be a little thinner. And I can add value back in a little sachet. The lightest part, the whitest part of this right eye is on the right side. So I could I'm going to pull out some of that on the right side of the iris, which will also help shape the iris. We're looking at the negative space now. And I can see that bottom lash line is pretty light. It's getting hit by the light. I'm just going to open that up with the eraser. Also on the left eye, there's this really beautiful highlight happening here. Like so. So I'm still looking just to have a very soft drawing at this point. Once I feel really confident about how things look, then I can go in with a pencil and really solidify the darks in these features. All right, it's looking good. I'm going to push this line up a little bit, like that. A little bit more. Which makes me think I want to push the left one up. So let me open that eyelid a little bit on the right eye. Here we go. So I'm looking at the shadow shapes in the right eye corner, and it kind of comes past the edge of the eyebrow. and makes this little rectangular shape. And moving into the eye there. Like that. Just restating that crease on that right eye. Making sure it's nice and round. Comes right down into this dark right corner. Let's check the width of the eye. I'm going to go from the shadow corner to that outer corner, and it looks good. Looks good. I want to open it a little more, bring that bottom line down. So they do line up. So that is good. I think getting this lower lash shadow shape in will solidify the eye placement. Now this shadow shape stops before it gets too far past the other one above it. I like to imagine what shadow shapes would be like when you look at clouds and you imagine them making different animals or things. I do that with shadows. I'm like, what does this shadow shape remind me of? I can't really think of what this one looks like. But it is this sort of shape. Maybe it's like a sideways Nike sort of swoosh. Just do it. It's a just do it swoosh. Which now makes me see a bit more of that happening in the left eye as well. Something like that. I don't like anything to be too perfect. To mess it up once I put it in. So I think that looks like the bottom of the eye. to add some value to this right eye on the right, I'm sorry, on the left side. And while I'm doing that, I'm thinking about this is a rounded ball inside of the eye socket, so I know how that should be, you know, the light's hitting it, more light on this part, and then it's rolling away from the light. So I'm keeping that in mind. While I'm putting in these little marks. And this area is a little darker because it's moving away from the light. So the light's hitting here. It's in line with the highlight in the eye, which I think I want to move up. There we go. I'm just cleaning up the highlight in the left eye a little bit as well. So you can keep an eye on it. Keep an eye on it. There we go. So I'm liking those eyes pretty good. Let me see if I can get you guys a little closer. Okay, hold on. Oops, went too far. There we go. So there's where we are at the moment. And I've been live for, gosh, oh my gosh, like an hour and 20 minutes. So I think this is probably a good place to stop the live. I'll continue videoing, and I will post the finished sketch next Saturday on my channel. So thanks for joining me. I hope that the video and the sound and the restreaming and everything worked together, and that was fun. So that's the good way to start the charcoal portrait with my new Casey Baugh bubble effect charcoal kit, which I will be sure to show you how I make these bubble effects with the acetone in the part 2. All right, guys, thanks for joining me, and I will see you next Saturday for the finished portrait.